I think it was Safadine who put out an interesting post recently and said, you don't need to understand the technical, dimensions of Bitcoin to be a Bitcoiner, but you do need to understand the financial dimensions.
Keep 'em cold till I'm old. I don't plan to blow my load. Wallet so blue, if you know, you know. It's better than bonds, better than gold. Finna reap up what I sow. Fit money can't keep up, it gets sold. How many times you been told? DCA's the way to go. Higher highs, higher lows. Every year my network grows. Every day my network grows. Running relays, running nodes. Yeah. Dollar a day's a minimum. Stats, zap sats. Any fear I get, flipping them.
Suman, thank you so much for agreeing to be on Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. You've recently released a book called Reclaiming Sovereignty, and you also posted a video about the Cree Nation in Quebec starting to learn about Bitcoin. So I reached out to you and asked you if you would kindly come on my podcast to discuss this more. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course. Well, first, thank you so much, Seda, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I just released my first Bitcoin book, and I'm happy to be sharing it with the world. It's been incredibly exciting. People from all corners of the globe are sort of interested in it. They've been reaching out to me. It's a really different kind of book. So I really took my personal journey and put it to paper. And it was what I learned about Bitcoin and many dimensions of Bitcoin, and from a very kind of relatable place. But at the same time, what I did was I interviewed people from all over the world, and I got their perspective, and I brought my own. And I really look at Bitcoin as a global social movement. And that is the perspective that I took. And so I coined the term the humanity of Bitcoin. And while diving into many facets, the central theme is people and what is it about Bitcoin that draws us to this technology, to this financial instrument.
Yeah, it's later on I will reveal to you the part of your book that I enjoyed the most. I interpret it as your aha moment. You may not interpret it that way, but I thought it was really fascinating because before you came to Bitcoin and before writing the book, you actually had a life as a trader, which I mean, when you mentioned it during our discussion before this podcast, I was like, what? Because, my biases, you do not sort of like epitomize what I see a trader to be. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Well, believe it or not, there are many, many people in the crypto trading space. And I honestly, discovered it, and I thought I would try my hand at trading, and I trained, I learned, and it was a very disappointing experience. And I think that's really what led me to Bitcoin, because I was initially, I was drawn to the autonomy that it can provide people, right? With trading, you're
Yeah.
working independently, you're like a freelancer, but at the same time, I think I was naive. And so the journey was not what I had expected. And it was a good thing, in a way, because it got me onto a path that was completely different. But I had to learn the hard way, so to speak, because, DeFi is a very mixed bag, and not everything is what it seems to be on the surface.
Yeah. What is the expression? You paid your tuition through experience, and that's what it is. You recently attended Consensus. Was there like in Toronto specifically? Was there like a trading audience there as well, or was it? Because I follow John Tellis on Instagram, and he actually gave a debrief because he attended Consensus as well. And from what I gathered from him, it was like a mixed bag kind of thing. It wasn't like a Bitcoin only event. Did you see other traders there, or was there anything like in particular that you got from Consensus that stuck with you?
Absolutely, yes. I did a few posts about consensus. I was really impressed in one way, which was that there was a very strong Bitcoin presence,
Yeah.
not just in terms of the panelists and discussions, the sponsorship itself. There were Bitcoin minings there, mining companies there.
Yeah.
Uh, but what I did, which was maybe a little different or unconventional, was I reached out to people who were working at Consensus. And I was, very pleasantly surprised to learn that they were Bitcoiners. Like this was their day job. Working for a crypto asset, or maybe they're working with an app that works with crypto assets, but at heart they're Bitcoiners. And it was incredible to see the number of Bitcoiners, engaged there as media, as visitors, like I said, panelists. So it was a really great experience for me as a newcomer to the crypto space, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I made some wonderful connections with people, and so you have to take away from consensus what you want to get out of it, kind of thing. And there's a lot of other things going on, and I just focused on what was important for me.
That sounds like life. That is like in life, you have to take, what you need from it and try to like keep the rest, by the wayside.
Yeah, it was incredible. Like I don't know how it happened, but you just meet your tribe and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I hung out with one woman I'd met from Miami. She was amazing, huge hardcore Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
Then a podcaster who had interviewed me, a little earlier. I connected with her, so it was amazing. We find our people, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree with that. And based in Toronto, is there like from your, so I'm going to go into the book a little bit here because the first person that you describe, Elle, without giving too much away, her story is based in Toronto as well. Is there, and also, I was surprised to read this, but there's a description of a meetup where Jimmy Song actually attended, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize that he went to Toronto as well. Is there, or are there a lot of Bitcoiners in Toronto?
I think there's a strong number of them. One of the issues we have with Toronto, for people who are not familiar with our city, is very spread out.
Yeah,
So it's not conducive for, regular hangouts, so to speak, right? So we meet monthly. There's a couple of different organizations. Some are purely Bitcoin. Some say they're Bitcoin, but they're not,
yeah.
which sometimes happens. But there is a Bitcoin community. In fact, tonight is my Toronto launch party. So
Oh,
yes,
fantastic.
yes, this evening. So, we're a great group and they have been instrumental. And I acknowledge them, in my book, because they were supportive, they worked with me, I learned from them. So it's an amazing community here.
So your timing, from someone who tried trading, got burned from it, and walked away, you're up. Shall
Sorry.
we pause? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. But your timing, like, is amazing because we're experiencing all-time highs in terms of, fiat land.
Yes.
With Bitcoin, we're at like 111,000 US dollars. So that's pretty good. You
Yeah.
could not have planned that if you wanted to.
Yeah. No, I started during the bear market. When I began research 2.5 years ago, over 2.5 years ago now, since the book has, been out for almost 3 months. So I was, very much interested not in price, value.
Yeah.
That's where I was. That was the thing that got me, you know, hooked and triggered to explore Bitcoin.
Yeah, what I appreciate about your book and the framing of your book is the fact that you do walk us through the stories of multiple Bitcoiners from all over the world. What inspired you to actually take this approach in your storytelling? And then, sort of, I'll say the part that I really liked when you're talking about Paco de la India, Run with Bitcoin. And so for the audience members who don't know, he's active. I think he had a YouTube channel as well. He decided to tour the world with Bitcoin only. And there's a part in your book where you say, you realize that it's also a medium of exchange as opposed to this like trading tool. And I was like, yes, like that is such a brilliant moment in the book. What made you decide to actually take this approach?
Well, it's funny because there are a couple of things involved here. One was, what can I offer people? What
Yeah.
can I offer? Because as I wrote in my introduction, I felt that there's something to learn here, something that I wanted to share in a book form, and I wanted to take that on. I wanted to take on a book project, but I'm not an economist,
Yeah.
and I'm not a developer, right? I'm not a techie. So what can I offer people? And then I realized, well, a lot has been written about Bitcoin, yet we haven't heard stories, narratives. And it was also part of my feeling around Bitcoin that it is such a huge social movement. And
It
that
is.
dimension hasn't really, been explored so much. We talk about it being a global movement and, borderless money and all of that. But I basically shared my own story. So it was, we were always talking about be yourself, right? Just be yourself. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I was like, okay, I'm just going to be myself here. And it was kind of like a very layered project because I was learning as I went along, reaching out to people from all over the world and sharing my story, their story, and the story of Bitcoin. So it was like this complex dance
Yeah.
happening at the same time.
And you also do something that I find quite fascinating. So when I started to learn about Bitcoin, it was the emphasis is really about Bitcoin being multidisciplinary, and you can literally fall down, the economics rabbit hole, Keynesian versus Austrian, and never resurface. You could fall down the cryptographic rabbit hole and never resurface. But you've decided to reframe things into a trinity, and I wrote it down. So you look at it through the lens of technology, utility, and social participation. How did you come to reframe things in that model? And do you find that people find it a little more or a little easier to understand by simplifying sort of the three sort of areas to to study?
Okay, so I think it's interesting because, as a writer, you simplify things for yourself, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's kind of like this creative chaos, and all these ideas, and I'm trying to simplify them so I can write about them, right? So I believe I'm really clear, like, I'm just creating these pillars, and each pillar is a matrix of a million subjects within
Excellent.
itself, right?
Yeah.
So I just created these pillars not necessarily as a specific way of looking at Bitcoin, but as simply as a tool to help people kind of organize the information. So, and of course, I talk about how they're all interrelated too. Like one affects the other, right? So the Trinity was just a way for newcomers, right? And for myself, because I was a newcomer, back when I began writing, to understand, the different parts. And then of course we expand on all of them. So that was the idea. It wasn't about, I think Bitcoin is very interdisciplinary and they're all interwoven. And but you can look at one dimension at any point and, like you said, go down a very deep rabbit hole. And
Yeah,
I did with
totally.
mining. So. you know.
It's, if I can be honest, when I saw the word utility, I think because of my experience, I felt a little bit triggered because it made me think of like altcoin marketing, what's the utility of this token and stuff like that. And then of course I read further and I was like, this makes sense conceptually, especially for a new person, as you say, coming to Bitcoin, because, like if you throw out cryptography to someone who is looking to save for, I don't know, a dream vacation or for retirement or for college for your kids or for your forever home or something, you may not necessarily see the importance of cryptography with your greater life project.
Absolutely. And, I think it was Safadine who put out an interesting post recently and said, you don't need to understand the technical, dimensions of Bitcoin to be a Bitcoiner, but you do need to understand the financial dimensions, like that you can't outsource. But we don't have to understand every little dimension of, okay, what's happening on the technical side. If you're curious and you want to be up on those, facets of Bitcoin, sure. And a lot of people are. I always try and keep my hand in
Yeah.
on all aspects, but I'm not an expert on them, right? I can't be an expert on that. That's not my area of strength.
Hi, everyone. It's Saida, host of Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions. To my listeners based in Canada and the US, if you're looking for a seamless way to stack sats, i.e., save money in Bitcoin, check out the Bitcoin Well. And you're probably thinking, Sai, you moved to Switzerland a long time ago. How do you know the service is good? Well, I asked my father, the man who famously told me there's nothing wrong with being frugal, to test out their service, and everything checks out. He visited one of the ATMs in Scarborough. It was very intuitive, very easy to use, and the fees were not too high. So if my dad says it's okay, it's okay. Remember to use referral code AAB21Q when you stack sats with the Bitcoin Well. And please, 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 let me know how your experience is. Give me all of the details. And if you'd ever like to be on Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions to talk about your experience with Bitcoin Well or just your experience with Bitcoin in general, I would be more than happy to host you. Yeah, no one is an expert. I mean, I've been at this for like many years, and I find something that happens is that if I don't look at, a specific discipline in a while, it's like I forget everything. You know what I mean? And I come back to it, I'm like, what? Like I wrote this, or, I look back to my notes, I'm like, I understood this before.
No, absolutely. Like, it's a lot. Like, we could be reading all day and we still wouldn't understand every facet of Bitcoin. Like, this is what I really love about the community. Like, it's so vibrant, it's so rich
Yeah.
in information. Like, there's so many people writing and learning and studying so many aspects of Bitcoin, which is great because you have all this information available, at your fingertips if you choose to, want to dive in and say, okay, today I want to learn about X around Bitcoin, or I want to understand, price movement, or I want to understand what's happening with Bitcoin payments, through Lightning or through the
Yeah.
blockchain, right? It's fine. You can do that.
For me right now, my like my sort of the itch that I'm desperately trying to scratch is this whole idea of knots versus the different versions of Bitcoin Core. And so what I decided to do was I got an old laptop repaired. I bought an external hard drive, and since it'll be actually it's almost 2 weeks now. Friday will make it 2 weeks. I've been downloading the entire blockchain, and I decided to download absolutely everything. No pruning, no nothing. And it's taking a really long time. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this is a great experience in speaking to someone who is new to Bitcoin and who wants the full experience to validate your own transactions. Because the last time I downloaded the full blockchain was like years ago, and it's added so much weight. The size has gotten so much bigger since then. And so Yeah, so this is the itch I'm desperately trying to scratch. When it's finally downloaded, I'm gonna see if I can, point my little bit axe to Ocean and develop my own block template.
It's
I know I
great.
probably won't do it well and stuff. Like I will certainly make lots of mistakes, but it's part of my learning process.
Yeah, and this is the wonderful thing about Bitcoin. You can be as involved and as engaged as you want to be. And I haven't reached the point where I'm running a node, but I want to eventually.
Yeah.
I want to because it's again part of the participatory nature of Bitcoin. We can be involved in a various number of ways.
It's I think that if a new person were to ask me about running a node, I would advise to find an old hardware device and maybe pay a little bit extra for, like your external hard drive and download the software and go from there as opposed to buying like I'm not going to name any like brands or anything so I don't want to like sound like I'm poo-pooing on them, but as opposed to buying something that's prepackaged, like just try and experiment, with very little and like go to an ATM or an exchange and get like maybe the equivalent of $50 worth of Bitcoin and just practice that way as opposed to going the whole prepackaged route to experience it, to get a sense of what this software
Yeah,
is.
yeah, like I think that if you want to go into it, being hands-on is important. And that's hands-on, you can't compare it to anything else. When you're hands-on and you're, getting engaged and you're really getting into it, there's no replacement for that kind of
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, definitely. So, in your book, so you feature Elle, the young artist who, is just not discouraged,
Teenager.
but
Yeah.
teenager, yeah, who, the idea is that her art is not sustainable financially, throughout her life. You talk about the couple in Toronto, the with the truckers protest and they move away, Paco del India. Why did you select these profiles of people to write about?
Well, I wanted to choose a people that were diverse, like a very diverse group. And
Yeah.
if you'll notice that each story highlights a different dimension of Bitcoin in a way, right? Like someone is embracing Bitcoin because they want financial freedom. Someone is, behind Bitcoin because it's providing them with political freedom,
Yeah.
right? Of course, I have two chapters on the unbanked, and that's another huge subject altogether, where Bitcoin is stepping in and filling gaps, right?
Yeah.
So stories that I felt kind of reflected the ethos of Bitcoin in different ways, and that were powerful. And it was a very instinctual experience, like choosing.
Yeah, definitely. With respect to the unbanked, what stood out for you the most? Like what touched you the most and what clicked for you the most?
Well, I think it was a shocker for me personally. Like even though, I try and keep up on things, I don't think I was aware of the scale of just how many people around the world do not have access to financial services. They don't have a bank account. They cannot access one for a variety of different reasons. And that shocked me. So that was the first thing. The second thing that was the big shocker that I talk about in the book is just how easily and smoothly Bitcoin came in and filled that gap.
Yeah.
That was incredible for me. And that's very inspiring. That's very hopeful for people who, we may not be directly connected with in any way, but they live all around the world. And that's, I think, for me, really one of the biggest reasons why we should support Bitcoin for that
Yeah.
in itself. How can
Yeah.
you question that? How can you tell someone, oh, you shouldn't use Bitcoin? Oh, why not? Well, because it's not part of the system. Well, what if it's giving me something I've never had before, which is freedom,
Yeah.
dignity, to be able to engage with people financially in a way that I've never had access to before.
Yeah, and I had Marcel Lorraine from Bitcoin Data. She's the founder and CEO, and she was talking about in, I'll say, certain African countries because I don't remember the specific country she named. Women do not have property rights. So it's, if there's an inheritance, and I say it in quotation marks, it cannot be passed down to the female child because she's not allowed to own property. So in addition to helping the unbanked, it is also property that some people, some women in this case, can actually own for the first time. That's incredible.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that that's something that we in the West totally take for granted, what it is to be able to own something. You might not be able to afford it. I mean, that's another discussion. But if you can afford it, you are actually allowed by law to own it.
It's about access, right? It's about having choices, having access to things that were never, possible before. And financial access is huge. It's
Yeah.
the foundation of our lives. We don't have financial freedom. We're going to be pretty much hostage to those who have it.
Yeah, 100%. So the other aspect of your book too that resonates a lot with me because I do this podcast and I have guests from everywhere come on and share their Bitcoin experiences, or if they work for a Bitcoin company, they're talking about the product or service that they offer. Is the idea that we're all Bitcoiners, we all learn humanly through stories, but sometimes stories aren't what they really are. So there's the distinction between, I guess, being inspired by what someone is saying and then doing the work behind the scenes to actually learn for yourself, as opposed to just following influencers, or as my dad says, influencers sounds like influenza, like
Right.
it's a virus type of thing. So how do you approach that, and what advice, I guess, would you give to readers if they read about a person and it turns out that, that story doesn't check out, or there could be multiple stories about that person, floating around, and you don't quite
Right.
know how to verify it since you don't know the person directly?
Yeah, I think that's valid. And I obviously, verification is always a big issue these days. How do we
Yeah.
verify things? I think that for me, these stories were meant to be catalysts for people
Yeah.
to explore further. You know what I'm saying? So for me, a story, what is the value of a story? What does it do for us?
Yeah.
How can it impact our lives? So that's what the intent has always been, which
Yeah.
was that, and I'm very clear in, like, within the first few pages, is that everyone needs to do their own research to explore Bitcoin,
Yeah.
because that is a foundational piece of being a Bitcoiner, is taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And so my book is about, sharing what other people have experienced. Why, it's just meant to be a mirror where this is what other people have done. Now it's up to you to explore what
Yeah.
you want to do for yourself, right? And so it's meant to do two things, which is, generate curiosity. How, what is it about Bitcoin that I might want to learn? And B is hearing the stories of people and the transformative nature of Bitcoin. It's about how do I want to reimagine what freedom means, right? Because that's supposed to be important for people to sort of think about. And I talk about, what is freedom? Why is Bitcoin such an incredibly vast social movement? Because it's speaking to something that is universal. Like, that's the key here, that the humanity of Bitcoin is about, what is it about Bitcoin that is touching people's hearts the way it touched my heart. But if it does, then go for it, right? Learn. Go on a Bitcoin adventure. Join
Yeah.
a group. Listen to a podcast.
Yeah, and experiment with it. So at the top of this interview, I did jump into the trading part pretty quickly because I find that super fascinating. But I didn't ask you, what about Bitcoin touched your heart and what prompted you to start learning about Bitcoin only and putting like DeFi, for example, to the side?
Yeah, it was really clear cut for me. And it's funny because someone asked me this question earlier this week, and I feel like I've kind of distilled it down to two main pieces. And
Yeah.
I think they're very strong themes. And of course, there are many reasons why people enjoy Bitcoin, are so happy to be in this movement. So for me, it was two. One of them was the sincerity of, excuse me, the decentralized nature of Bitcoin.
Hmm.
That there are no intermediaries, there's no one
Yeah.
blocking me and my asset, me and my wealth, right?
Hmm.
Me and my money. So that's very much key. And as we know, intermediaries are not always very helpful. So we understand that. So that's a very big piece. And I saw the genuine nature of Bitcoin as a
Yeah.
decentralized asset compared to everything else I've been looking at. The second part, which really captured my heart and really got me going on this journey and why I reached out to so many people, was when I saw Bitcoin as a social movement. When I
Hmm.
saw just just what a hugely innovative and phenomenal global system this was evolving into, that it had already evolved into, actually. And the idea of this global community that we're all part of, and yet at the same time, doesn't ask us to be anything different than who we are. And I think that's very, very powerful because, and I write about that, about this is the one movement where you are completely and, unapologetically allowed to be yourself. It wants you to be a sovereign individual, and yet you are also part of a community. There are no, it's not conditional.
I could not agree with you more. And it's what is it's permissionless is greater than inclusion. The idea of inclusion, and we have to adapt and accommodate other people and whatever. When I realized what permissionless actually means, how it's operationalized, it means that someone in South Africa can build an app, build a company on top of Bitcoin, make proposals, whatever, just like I can in Switzerland, just like you can in Canada. I was like, okay, like this is what the real deal is, permissionless, as opposed to telling everyone how to think and who to like and who not to like and stuff like that. It
Exactly.
is, which is why I encourage people as much as possible. I know that this is tied obviously to money and finances, but I encourage people as much as possible to just take, a little tiny bit, a few Satoshis, and experiment and transact with someone across the world on a platform like Nostr, for example, or another platform, so that you can see the actual power of trade in real time across time and space.
It's quite mind blowing.
It really is. And so I guess, why would people want to pick up your books, a value proposition, and what do you want people to walk away with after they've read your book?
Well, this book was designed for people who don't know anything about Bitcoin. So this is really important because Bitcoin can be very intimidating. And
Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of stereotypes around Bitcoin, and I think it's very misunderstood. And the book is meant to be a soft approach, an introduction that is meant to be helpful, right? And I think that the stories of people and why they're in Bitcoin and why I got into Bitcoin as a newcomer is going to go a long way with someone who has preconceived ideas. So it's meant to, I guess, in a way, break stereotypes, dispel myths about what Bitcoin is all about and who are Bitcoiners. And it is meant to inspire people to learn something, because when you learn something new, well, that's kind of cool, right? Like that's what a book is meant to do. It's meant to, you're meant to learn something and then you decide where you want to take it. Everyone is different, right? I
Yeah.
believe that, everyone has to do what's right for them. And if this book inspires people to explore Bitcoin further, I've done my job. Like
Yeah.
I really have. Like that's the whole point. It's not meant to explain everything about Bitcoin. No, it's meant as an introduction to Bitcoin, many facets of it, but fundamentally it's about the social movement and what is it really about?
Amen. Inspire. Can you imagine? I actually had a friend message me earlier today. I've been talking to her about Bitcoin since 2020 or 2021.
Wow.
I helped her create a wallet through an exchange over here called Relay. I think I may have bought like she sold me some shoes or something, and I said I'm gonna buy these shoes from you, and I will give you euros if you promise to buy Bitcoin with this, you know?
Okay.
And, time goes by. She's busy. Bitcoin, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic. And I received a message. I think she messaged me a few days ago, but I only saw it this morning. And she sent me a clip from the Tuttle twins, and someone in France actually put the subtitles in French on the clip about money printing and central banking, and the solution to this is Bitcoin. And I was surprised. I was like, "Whoa!" And I was like, "Yeah, this is what I've been trying to explain for like 5 years now." And and she said, I still have the wallet that you helped me open, and I look at it every single day. Thank you, Saida. And I was I'm a little touched, but just one person whose life has changed a little bit because, it happened to be me, but it could have been someone else, spoke about Bitcoin is like, it is humbling and it's flooring. So
It's
I can only imagine your book.
Well, thank you. It's very powerful because education is a process. It's one person at a time. That's how it works, and that's real social change, right? Like a book, I designed it as a tool, right, for people to reimagine their lives and to understand the power of this technology and the power of this social financial instrument, social instrument, whatever you want to call it. And that's the point of the book. And I'm very happy that recently I was approached, and the First Nations Creek community is going to be using my book as part of their training program with the primer, the Bitcoin primer. And that's great because it will, it's just a tool. It's meant to be a tool.
Most definitely. I would love, or I would appreciate if you or someone were to document the learning journey of the Cree Nations as they start to incorporate Bitcoin more and more. And so I'd like the logistical, practical aspects of it, whether like each household would have their own node or whether there'd be like a community node or, because I'm not familiar with the culture, so I'm putting it out there.
Yeah.
And then like the changes, within the community, what they see, what they experience, how they review things, kind of thing. Like I think that would be such a precious sort of like capsule to be able to look at.
Well, you've said something very, very relevant here. Okay, interesting. I'm not going to spill the beans or anything, but I want to continue exploring how Bitcoin has impacted the lives of people. And, whether it's the Cree Nation, which are just taking their first step,
Yeah.
or other communities around the world that have adopted Bitcoin, embraced it, perhaps circular economies. I want to learn more, right? So I think that we need to do that. We
Yeah.
need to chronicle and understand exactly how people's lives have been changed for the better by Bitcoin and having embraced it.
Yeah, I think that would be an amazing project. We're going to wrap up the interview, but before we end, can you tell people where to find you, how to order your book's website, etc., your socials?
Yes, sure. So the easiest way to get my book is on Amazon. It's available in many, many countries. And my social, it's basically capital S, capital K, EUIS to freedom, which is S keys to freedom on Twitter. And my website is reclaimsovereignty.com.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something else or?
No, I wasn't
No?
sure. We're moving into the next
Yep.
segment. So,
Yeah, totally.
okay.
Well, thank you for doing this interview and stay tuned because we will do
Thank you.
21 questions in 10 minutes next.
Perfect. Ready.
Keys, 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 keys. Yeah. Man like quakes. Man like who? Yeah. Takes her Bitcoin off exchanges under self-custody. She runs her own node, providing liquidity. Yeah, she got her own keys. She got her own keys. She got her own keys. Yeah, she got her own keys. 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 Yeah, she got her own keys. Keys, keys.